Cornelia wanted to cry from hurt and run away, as she had done many times before. But her hatred for Catarina Navarro was so strong that she stood resolutely in front of her opponent, clenching her fists. She didn't have such an impressive group of supporters as her opponent did, but that didn't scare the 10-year-old girl. Catarina took 2 steps forward and, to the jeering of the crowd of like-minded people, asked with a sneer, "Come on, Santes, repeat what you said about me in class." Cornelia also took 2 steps forward. "You're a jerk and you look like a frog. You're great at tattling on everyone." The crowd suddenly fell silent, and Catarina's eyes widened. "Guys, that's all lies. Can't you see that she's lying?" Cornelia immediately added a weighty argument. "I'm not lying. I heard you whispering to the math teacher yesterday that Rodriguez cheated on test. That's why Alejandro was called to the board and got an F." The supporters cheered again, but these were condemning cries. Catarina, afraid of losing support, screamed hysterically, "You pauper! You freak! I'll make a chop out of you right now." The girl wanted to pounce on Cornelia, but missed and fell into a puddle herself. Taking advantage of the moment, Santes began to hit the offender with her fists in the torso. But Navarro scratched the opponent's face. Drops of fresh blood appeared on the freckled face of the attacker, and the crowd of young children cheered with delight. Cornelia didn't lose her composure and hit Navarro in the eye with her fist. She screamed so loudly that the witnesses of the fight scattered. Since the 4th graders chose a not very successful place to settle their differences, it was a small patch of land near the school workshops, so the disorder was noticed by the watchman. Holding a broom, the man rushed to the scene of the fight. The opponents hadn't had time to disperse, and the janitor grabbed Cornelia by the hood of her jacket and began to shake her. "Aren't you ashamed to bully girls? You're a boy." Santes hit the man's hand. "I'm not a boy. Let me go." The man looked closely at the thin face covered in freckles and realized he had made a mistake. He swore loudly. "Yes, who can say for sure nowadays, who's a boy and who's a girl? But I won't allow fighting on the territory entrusted to me. According to the instructions, I'm obliged to report to the school principal, let her deal with it." Catarina had already fully regained her composure. A crimson spot had appeared under her eye, and dirt was streaming from her cream-colored jacket. "Listen, she started it first. She attacked me." Taking advantage of the fact that the janitor was momentarily distracted, Cornelia broke free from his tight grip and ran out of the schoolyard as fast as she could. Catarina, in desperate helplessness, screamed after her, "I'll tell my dad everything. You'll get kicked out of school and sent to jail. You, poor thing, are just jealous of me. Because I have everything and your mom buys your clothes from a second-hand store." Cornelia heard everything and her insides boiled with anger from those hurtful words. She ran down the street, with salty tears streaming down her scratched cheek. Although it caused her discomfort and pain, the consequences of the fight were the least of her worries right now. She was most concerned about the injustice of it all. She had long been trying to solve the main puzzle of the universe. Why do some have everything while others don't even have the bare necessities? Her mom was still at work, and the first thing Cornelia did was go to the bathroom to assess her condition. She looked in the mirror and sighed heavily, for bleeding grooves stretched across her right cheek, all the way up to her eye. To calm herself down, the girl whispered with malicious pleasure, "I'll show her who's the sloven and the beggar. And I don't care about her dad, I'm not afraid of him. Actually, I'm not afraid of anyone." Cornelia noticed a plush teddy bear in the corner of the couch. This toy was almost her only valuable possession. She hugged the soft and warm semblance of a real animal to herself. "Miguel, maybe you know why people are so mean. Maybe anger is contagious like chickenpox. Because I was so angry today that I scared myself. You know, Miguel, I wanted to beat up that snob Catarina. She's annoying, and everyone in class hates her, but they're afraid to say anything. Even the teachers are afraid to give Catarina bad grades because her dad is a big boss. To be honest, Miguel, I'm jealous of Catarina too, because she has nice clothes, and she always brings sandwiches with real sausage to school. And then she eats them all by herself. The plush teddy bear, given to her long ago by her father, was Cornelia's only friend. He never interrupted her and always silently supported her. Only to Miguel could she entrust her most intimate secrets. She didn't even dare to tell her mom about many things. Cornelia hadn't even finished thinking about her mom when she heard the front door creak open. She pressed herself into the couch and hugged the teddy bear tighter. "Oh, Miguel, I'm gonna be in trouble now." A cheerful voice of the mother was heard from the hallway. "Cornelia, where are you hiding? Why aren't you greeting your mother?" The girl was afraid to move. Marta was in a good mood and called her daughter again. "Cornelia, are you sleeping? Come here quickly. I brought you something tasty." It made no sense to keep quiet, and the girl said in a low voice, "Mom, I'm not sleeping. I just have a little problem." Marta's friendly tone immediately turned into an angry exclamation. "What have you done again?" Before the girl could sigh, her mother was already standing near the couch. "Come on, show up. Let me have a look at you." Cornelia obediently showed her scratched cheek to her mother. The woman immediately began to lament. "Oh, you! My goodness! Who did this to you?" "Catarina Navarro. But don't worry, Mom, I hit her in the face too." "Cornelia, come on, you're a girl. Girls shouldn't fight. We need to treat the scratches with hydrogen peroxide, and then with iodine or brilliant green. Who knows what's under Catarina's nails? You can catch anything from these scratches. Even lice." Marta worked as a nurse in the surgical department and knew a lot about medicine. Neighbors often turned to her for help, trusting her experience. Cornelia was also proud of her mother. But Marta's intention to smear her cheek with the brilliant green frightened the girl. When Marta took out a bottle of green liquid, Cornelia screamed so loudly that the windows rattled. "Mommy, please don't smear me with this filth. Everyone at school will laugh at me tomorrow." Marta was taken aback. "Why are you yelling at your mother? You're too little to give me orders. The last thing we need is for you to catch some disease and then have me treat you. You have no idea how much all these ointments and emulsions cost. My salary won't be enough." Cornelia's cheek burned from the intense application of the brilliant green, and she cried bitterly. "I won't go to school with a green cheek. Everyone is already laughing at me. They say that a girl like me can't be friends with them, and people like me don't belong in a normal school." And who is saying this? Everyone. Especially Navarro. Her dad is so full of himself. Marta only paused for a moment. "Wait, so the daughter of the deputy mayor is in your class?" Cornelia didn't know exactly what position the father of her main rival held. She stopped crying, trying to figure out the hierarchy of the local elite. "Mommy, I don't really know what Catarina's dad does for a living, but she's always brought to school in a cool black car and then they pick her up. But today, Catarina left early on purpose to get back at me. Because during recess, I called her a brainless dullards. Did a fight break out because of that? There must have been another reason, right?" "Yes, we fought for justice." Marta even flinched, because those were very grown-up words coming from a 10-year-old girl. She hugged her daughter. "Sweetie, what do you understand by the word justice?" The girl blurted out without thinking. "I think that everyone should have the same rules. But Catarina and her friends think that they're allowed to do anything they want. Catarina always pushes her way forward, and the teachers jump around like puppies in front of her. Marta held her daughter tighter, as if trying to protect her from an invisible enemy. Unfortunately, my dear, we cannot change this world. Because people like Catarina's father have money and power. The shock to her daughter was so strong that she fell asleep on the couch with her teddy bear after dinner. Marta carefully covered the girl with a warm blanket and closed the living room door tightly behind her. The two-room apartment had been inherited from her mother. Marta didn't like to remember her deprived childhood. Besides her aunt, who lived in Madrid, they had no other relatives. Yes, her mother led a very secluded life, and little Marta knew nothing about her past. Only once, shortly before her death, her mother confessed. When you grow up, don't trust anyone. Neither friends nor enemies, you can't trust anyone. I trusted someone I loved, and he left me in the most difficult moment. Marta guessed what her mother was talking about. Was that when I was supposed to be born? Yes. I had to leave that city. I thought my relatives would support me, but everyone turned their backs on me. Even my own mother threw me out onto the street at first, but then took me back. That's why I didn't get an education and spent my whole conscious life cleaning up after those who had a better life than me. I admit, daughter, I've always been envious of people who don't need anything. Marta also envied her classmate who always had a new backpack and uniform during her school years. She was ashamed to attend school events because she didn't have a decent dress. This envy gradually corroded her heart, turning into anger towards the lucky ones. Marta's mother worked 2 jobs. From 5 in the morning, she cleaned the entrances and courtyards, and then went to the nearest grocery store to unload the goods. The unbearable work undermined the woman's health, and she died before she could even take a well-deserved break. To avoid ending up on the street, Marta was forced to work as a janitor. She couldn't even think about studying and only envied her former classmates who continued their education in universities. The most offensive thing was that those whom she used to be friends with avoided her. Even Natalia, who owed her a lot, began to avoid meeting her. Once, Marta caught her friend at the entrance and asked, "Why are you avoiding from me?" At first, the girl was a little confused, but then she herself asked Marta, "Don't you think you're asking stupid questions? Even a fool would understand everything, but it doesn't reach you." Natalia wanted to break through the entrance, but Marta rudely grabbed her by the collar. "Yes, I don't understand. That's why I want to hear from you what the reason is." The girl grimaced and pulled her hand away from her friend. "This coat costs crazy money, and you have no right to touch me with your dirty hands. And for those who don't understand, let me explain, we are no longer in school and it's time to forget about childhood friendship. We have completely different interests. You walk with a broom on the street, and I will soon receive a law degree. So, we're not on the same path." Marta was frozen in amazement. She didn't expect to hear such offensive words from her friend. Natalia took advantage of the moment and slipped into the entrance. After that meeting, Marta decided to change her life. She began to look for another, more respectable job. A mother's acquaintance, Aunt Sophia, helped her with finding a job. This woman had often helped them when they were in need. She lent her mother small sums of money and often brought them food. When Marta turned to her for help, Aunt Sophia readily promised, "I'll try to do something, although it's hard to find work now. Entire companies are closing all over the country. Teachers are becoming janitors. So, your situation is not the worst yet." Less than a week passed, and the mother's friend showed up on her own. "Marta, a very respectable person, is looking for a decent girl. You don't smoke, do you?" "No, Aunt Sophia. I told him that you have no bad habits." "And what kind of work is it?" "Household chores, cleaning, washing, cooking." "The man is respectable, recently widowed. He already had a housekeeper, but she got involved with his son and he fired her. He doesn't tolerate illicit relationships. So keep that in mind. He promised good pay if the helper will live in the house. Although, his estate is quite far from the city, in the neighboring region. Marta was despondent. Aunt Sophia, this plan doesn't work out for me. If I don't work on my land, they will evict me from my apartment. The woman replied optimistically. They can't evict you, you have full legal rights to this dwelling because your mother worked all her life. In the worst case, you can privatize the apartment, everyone does it now. I will clarify this issue. Aunt Sophia had connections everywhere, and she activated them at the right moment. Marta was provided with an official housing, allowing her to redeem it. When the girl found out the amount she had to pay, she was discouraged. Aunt Sophia, I will never in my life earn such a sum. You think so, but inflation is soaring and tomorrow those numbers will have a completely different value. If things get really tough, I'll help you for free. Maybe when you're old, you'll give me a glass of water, won't you refuse my kindness? Marta hugged the woman in gratitude. When the emotion subsided, she asked, Aunt Sophia, but you have a son. Yes, but we have issues because of his wife, we don't get along with her, and we quarreled with him because of her. Okay, let's not dwell on the sad things. Keep me updated and tell me if anything is wrong. Marta's new employer turned out to be very demanding. When she went 100 kilometers to the suburban settlement, she expected to see something like a cottage or a summer house. But the address that Aunt Sophia gave her was a 2-story pompous building. Leo Moreno, the owner, showed the girl the house himself. He told her in great detail what and when she should do. Then Leo said nothing about his son, who had recently become his main problem. Marta had been working in the businessman's house for over 2 months and had already become accustomed to the new place. Leo treated her paternally and had even made several pleasant gifts. This person did not boast about his high position and loved to talk about his difficult childhood and youth. He still idolized his late wife and shared his experiences with the young housekeeper. You know, Marta, I never thought losing a loved one could be so painful. My wife and I used to argue often, and we even wanted to divorce, so we lived apart for 6 months. But then we realized we couldn't be without each other. When my beloved Agata passed away, my life turned into a desert. If it weren't for my son, I probably would have left this fleeting world along with my wife. Marta listened to her boss's stories with bated breath, and he, in gratitude, gave her small gifts such as chocolates and cosmetics. One day, Leo asked, Marta, why don't you tell me anything about yourself? I should be a bore for you with stories about my life, but I know nothing about you. The girl was at a loss because she thought her life was uninteresting. I have nothing to tell you about myself. My mother raised me alone. I don't remember my father, he left my mom even before I was born. Bastard. The man pronounced the word with a special accent, but noticing that his tone had made a negative impression on the girl, he explained. I'm sorry for the slang, I've always despised men who avoid responsibility. In the old days, self-respecting men even took care of their illegitimate children as if they were their own. I tell my son that if I find out he's done something similar, I'll kick him out of the house. The girl felt awkward because she didn't want to get involved in her employer's family squabbles. But it turned out that she was involuntarily dragged into the conflict between the son and the father. Xavier appeared in the house on a rainy autumn day. Marta was doing her usual chores and saw a big black car pull up to the house. She didn't know much about car brands, so she didn't attach much importance to this event. But literally a few minutes later, there was chaos in the house, where there had always been silence and tranquility. The cook rushed into the room where Marta was cleaning. Girl, drop your work and come with me. The master's son has shown up. Marta quickly finished cleaning and went to the kitchen. However, she only saw the cause of her concern in the evening when she helped the cook set the table in the living room. The young man immediately noticed her and said, "Wow, do we have new staff? And such a lovely one. What's your name, beautiful creature?" Marta wanted to sink into the ground because the young man looked at her in such a way that she felt awkward. However, her timely appearance was saved by Leo. He showed his son a hefty fist and said, "Xavier, are you up to your old tricks again? I won't allow you to spoil my staff. You can do whatever you want at home, but you should behave properly here. Especially since Marta is a very decent girl." The young man just grinned and ran his fingers through his red hair like a comb. Later, Marta realized that this gesture expressed Xavier's highest degree of confusion. His father's warning had no effect on him, and he started to ambush her at every step. Moreover, he always tried to catch her off guard. Of course, this did not escape the father's attention, who scolded the young rascal in his office. Marta heard Leo shouting, "Xavier, leave your tricks alone. This girl has already suffered enough." The son retorted with a laugh, "Father, you have a bad habit of making a mountain out of a molehill. You see something more than just normal attention in elementary courting. Don't think I'm such an idiot that I forget about the boundaries of what's allowed." In the same raised tone, Leo said, "Stay away from her. I'll kick your legs if you insult this girl." Xavier replied with a laugh, "Dad, you can get a long sentence for that. And then, if you cripple me, you'll have to hire a servant to push me around in a wheelchair." That same evening, Leo called Marta aside and said, "Marta, if my son bothers you, tell me right away. My son is one of those who only understand rough methods. Persuasion doesn't work on them. So, don't be too gentle with him. You can even confront him directly if he bothers you." She was not very pleased with the role of the apple of discord, which is often mentioned in literature. She looked at the host with hope and said, "Leo, maybe I should leave you." The man immediately tried to convince the girl otherwise, that his son was just a fool, but otherwise a perfectly normal guy. "Did I scare you? I exaggerated things. I just, like any father, worry about my son. He has always had a restless nature, so I still worry that he might do something foolish. And you don't have to leave, I've become so accustomed to you over these past few months." Leo looked at her imploringly, and she stayed. For a short time, Xavier was quiet. When he greeted her, he did so as a host should. The young man no longer waited for her in secluded corners or made inappropriate compliments. And Marta let her guard down, thinking that the master's son had switched to a different target. She knew that Xavier led a wild lifestyle. He often came home in the early hours of the morning, and once even tried to bring a group of drunken women into the house, but the security guards stopped him. The father was immediately informed of his son's transgression, and he lectured him for over an hour in his office. After the serious talk, Xavier stormed out of his father's office saying, "Dad, I'm already 25. I'm a healthy man, and forgive me, but I need female company. If I'm bothering you so much, I'll leave tomorrow." Leo shouted after him, "Healthy men start families, they don't run around with women of loose morals. You can leave and never show your face to me again." Marta had never seen the host in such a state. The cook rushed out of her hiding place and whispered, "What, did Yuri get into trouble with the old man again?" "Seems like it." "Does it happen often?" "Constantly. Even during the life of Agata, there were real battles unfolding here." Xavier became interested in the female sex very early on. He is a fire in this regard. For a second, Marta thought the cook licked her lips like a cat. Of course, this comparison was a figment of her imagination, but the 40-year-old woman spoke in such a tone that it was not difficult to determine that she had personal experience with the owner's son. This discovery shocked Marta, but she did not pester the cook with questions. 2 days after the family conflict, Xavier left abroad again, and life in the businessman's house gradually returned to its usual course. The owner generously paid the housekeeper's services, and Marta quickly raised the amount necessary to buy the apartment. She dreamed of saving more money to buy new furniture and make repairs. Difficult life taught the girl to spend money rationally and never set impossible tasks for herself. That is, Marta was a realist and knew perfectly well that one day she would have to say goodbye to a comfortable life in Leo's mansion. But, like other people, the girl wanted to push this moment far into the future. Misfortune struck, literally, in broad daylight. Marta was doing her usual job when the frightened cry of the cook was heard. "Someone, help, the owner is not feeling well." The housekeeper rushed into the businessman's office, where the cook was trembling with fear holding a glass of water. The woman's hand was shaking, so the water spilled on the expensive carpet. Leo asked for water. "I brought it, but he..." The man was lying on the floor and gasping for air in convulsions. The girl shook the cook with all her might by the shoulders. "What are you? Call an ambulance quickly. Can't you see he's not feeling good?" The guards and staff gathered at the shouts. Marta leaned over the man, trying to help him. He smiled and whispered, "It's all over for me. Agata is calling me to the other side." When the paramedics arrived, the patient was already unconscious. Late in the evening, a guard who had accompanied the owner called from the hospital and reported that Leo had passed away. The happiest period in Marta's life ended so quickly and unexpectedly. Xavier came the next day, but he was no longer the reckless young man who could afford any extravagance. Grief weighed heavily on him, and for several days after the funeral, he wandered around the house like a lost soul. He refused to eat and spent most of his time in his father's office. The cook didn't know how to please the young master and shared her concerns with Marta. Other people drink alcohol in moments of grief, but Xavier doesn't drink at all or eat anything. If this continues, something bad might happen to him. "Marta, maybe you can talk to him. You used to get along with him quite well." Marta didn't bother to clarify what the cook meant by getting along with him. She knew that Xavier needed a wake-up call to snap out of it. The door to the office was slightly ajar, and she entered without knocking. Xavier sat in his father's chair with an indifferent look on his face. He looked at the maid, but didn't say anything. Marta sat next to him on a chair. "Xavier, I was with Leo in his last moments. He was smiling and said that your mother was waiting for him." A semblance of a smile appeared on the young man's face. They lived like cats and dogs. They argued without restraint. During their fights, they even forgot about my existence. Essentially, I was just a ping-pong ball in their game. At least, that's how I felt until the 7th grade. I used to be very sensitive to my parents' fights. But now, I understand that they're nothing compared to the emptiness I feel inside. There's a cosmic black hole inside me, Marta. Do you understand me? Marta had never seen Xavier so depressed before, and she really wanted to support him. "I understand you perfectly, Xavier. I also had to go through the loss of a loved one. My mother died very young. And besides her, I have no one else in the whole world. And your father? I don't know anything about him, and my mother never talked about him. This topic was forbidden for us. I only remember when I was very young, an important man came to visit us. My mother talked to him for a long time, and when he left, she told me, 'That's your father.'" Xavier looked at the girl as if he was seeing her for the first time. "Yes, it was handed to you, not enviable. Everyone has their own cross to bear, and you can't determine whose burden is lighter." The young man was surprised. "Where does such a young girl get such deep thoughts from?" he asked. "These are not my thoughts," Marta replied. "This is how Aunt Sophia, my mom's friend, likes to say. In principle, she is the only person in this world who does not refuse to help me." "May I also help you?" he asked, looking at her with such a piercing gaze that everything in her soul was turned upside down. Marta nodded in agreement and did not pull away her hand when Xavier squeezed it in his palms. "You know, Marta, you are a unique girl. I won't hide the fact that I've had many women, but I could never talk as freely with any of them as I can with you. They were all just passing companions." Although more than 10 years have passed since that touching meeting, Marta still could not understand what seed had sprouted the flower of her love. Out of pity or plain gullibility? Their serious relationship began with harmless walks in the park and candid conversations in the evenings. Then one night, Xavier knocked on her door. Marta forgot about everything else because she had been eagerly awaiting this step from the man she had fallen in love with. He came to her every night, and she could already see herself next to her beloved in her dreams. No, Marta did not need wealth because Xavier had become her main treasure. But Xavier was not as romantic as the young housekeeper. He quickly found emotional balance and seriously thought about his future. However, in these plans, there was no place for a simple girl who just looked after the order in his wealthy house. According to the cook, Xavier's first decision as the young owner was to optimize the staff. "Marta, something is happening here. I'm afraid we'll all be fired tomorrow. As they say, a new broom sweeps clean." Amazingly, the cook was among the first to suffer. Xavier paid her compensation for 3 months and parted ways without regret. The woman wept. "I worked in this house for almost 15 years. I made breakfast for Xavier when he was in school. And then..." The cook didn't say anything about what happened later, but Marta guessed it was a hint about her relationship with the young master. Xavier refused the services of the maid and the gardener. He also replaced the security guards. The housekeeper waited anxiously for her turn, but her situation was complicated by the fact that she was pregnant. Several times the girl wanted to tell Xavier that she was going to have a baby, but she couldn't find the right moment. So, one day, he himself noticed the changes that could no longer be hidden. But Marta, even in her worst nightmare, could not have imagined that Xavier would react to the prospect of fatherhood in this way. He called her to his office and began to scold her in a rough manner. "Marta, don't you want to tell me anything?" She looked at him and smiled. Perhaps this smile triggered a fit of rage of the man. "Why are you smiling like a clay statue from Easter Island?" Marta wanted to say that those famous statues don't smile. But she didn't even have time to open her mouth when Xavier pounced on her again. "I'm asking you again, Marta. Don't you want to tell me anything? Why did you clam up like a mouse in a hole? The entire staff is already discussing your belly, and you're pretending that nothing has happened. It's just plain naivety." Of course, she didn't expect such a violent reaction and muttered almost inaudibly. "Xavier, I wanted to tell you earlier, but you were never in the mood. Don't tell me fairy tales. What does my mood have to do with it? You deliberately dragged this out to confront me with the fact. But you're wasting your time because your plans will never come true. I'll never marry a housekeeper. And besides, I don't know whose child you're carrying." The man casually pointed to the girl's belly and made a disgusted face. She couldn't bear to be humiliated by someone she had completely trusted. Without realizing it, Marta slapped Xavier, and he, out of surprise, began to wildly roll his eyes. "Get out of here. I don't want to see you here by evening." At that moment, she wanted more than anything to run away from this house. She didn't want to see Xavier's self-satisfied face anymore, but scenes of her being happy with him kept appearing in her mind against her will. For several hours, Marta had been going home in the bus, thinking about how she would live on. She returned to her empty apartment and cried all night. In the morning, she went to the only person who always understood her. Aunt Sophia listened to her story surprisingly calmly and sensibly remarked, "Tears won't help the sorrow. You need to think about what to do next." Marta was completely bewildered and didn't know what she would do tomorrow. She said in an indifferent tone, "I'll have to look for any job again. I have a little money for the time being. Leo spoiled me. But his son is a complete scumbag. To put a woman who carries your child under her heart on the street is the height of meanness." "Well, never mind, the response will definitely come, that's the law of karma." Marta spent a whole week visiting organizations in the city in search of work, but nobody wanted to employ a pregnant woman. At best, they politely said, "Sweetheart, we need permanent staff, and you'll be on maternity leave in 3 months. And we'll have to pay you benefits." Since her job search was unsuccessful, Aunt Sophia had to use her connections again. Thanks to her, Marta was temporarily employed as a hospital cleaner. Her pregnancy didn't bother anyone there, but the job was hard for a pregnant woman. The expectant mother regularly went to consultations because she was worried about the health of her future baby. Once, during an ultrasound, the doctor was surprised. What a surprise! Yes, there's not one, but 2 fetuses. And one clearly wants to play hide and seek, hiding behind his or her sibling. The sex is not yet visible, but most likely, you, mommy, will have 2 boys or 2 girls. Congratulations. Marta sat on the couch and was afraid to believe what she heard. She came home in complete despair and burst into tears. Aunt Sophia met this news with her typical optimism. God doesn't give anything for nothing. It's great, 2 children at once. The demographic plan can be fulfilled in one fell swoop. The days before delivery were joyless. Marta constantly thought about Xavier. She regretted that slap. She thought she had overreacted. If it weren't for that outburst, Xavier would have left her in the house. But her common sense told her that she had done the right thing, and the owner was unlikely to keep a living witness to his sin in the house. She was on maternity leave when Xavier unexpectedly came to visit. When the doorbell rang, Marta thought it was Aunt Sophia coming to visit her and loudly shouted, "Come in, you know that I always keep my door open during the day." The door slammed shut, but unfamiliar footsteps could be heard in the hallway. By the end of her pregnancy, Marta's belly had grown to such a size that she had difficulty moving around the apartment. Groaning, she got up from the couch and headed to the hallway. Xavier was standing there with a bouquet of flowers and a smile. "Hey! I finally found you. You ran away without leaving your address. Why are you here? I want to help. I don't need any handouts." Marta spoke quite rudely, but Xavier didn't pay attention to her tone. He unabashedly examined her swollen figure. "You've changed so much. Pregnancy looks good on you. Is that all you wanted to say to me?" "No. However, you don't seem very welcoming to guests. And about the help and gifts, I have every right to take care of my child," the woman said sarcastically. "I'm having twins, as the examination showed. So don't hurry, Xavier, to burden your manly shoulders with such responsibilities." The man was clearly bewildered. "It's amazing. We've never had twins in our family before. But my maternal relatives have had such cases. Come in, Xavier, since you've already showed up." The man looked around the modest apartment. "Maybe you'll treat me to some tea. I brought a cake with me, you love sweets. I can't have extra calories. But I can offer you not only tea, but also lunch. Of course, if you're satisfied with simple food." Xavier sat down on the new couch that Marta had bought with her maternity leave pay. While the woman was setting the table, the guest tried to explain his ugly behavior. Marta, I got your outrage, but understand me. Everything happened so spontaneously between us, we are completely different. Yes, I won't deny it, I had certain feelings for you, but… Xavier, don't try to sugarcoat it. Just tell me straight up that you don't want anything to do with me and my children. I'm not trying to take your wife's place and I'm not asking for anything from you. Marta, I will help you, I promise. Here's something to get you started. The man placed a thick envelope on the couch. I will regularly provide money for the care of my children. She couldn't hold back her tears. She wanted to throw the money in his face, but she didn't. She just whispered, Xavier, please leave. And he left, leaving a package of fruits and a cake on the table. The delicious-smelling soup was still sitting on the coffee table in the living room, but they didn't succeed to have a lunch. Perhaps the stress and emotions had taken a toll on the young woman, as she went into labor earlier than expected. The ambulance barely managed to get her to the hospital, where Marta was immediately taken to a large white room, where 3 other women were also suffering from contractions. 2 midwives were struggling to attend to all of them. Their faces were covered with masks, but from their voices, Marta could tell that one of the girls was very young. She was flustered and kept complaining to her senior colleague. Cornelia, I can't do this, everything is slipping out of my hands. Marta saw the older midwife give the young specialist a stern look. Pull yourself together and watch your language, there's no need to so panic here. The patients are watching us, don't forget that. Marta didn't remember much of what happened next because the contractions kept coming one after another, and she couldn't catch her breath. 2 other women were screaming in pain next to her, and then everything faded into a huge cloud of pain. She didn't know how long it lasted, but suddenly there was a squeal next to her and a cry from the senior midwife. Christina, wake up. Marta tried to turn her head in that direction, but Cornelia yelled at her. Why are you moving? Lie still. You have another 1 child to give birth to. The lights went out again, and she was enveloped in a cloud of pain. When the woman regained consciousness, she saw the senior midwife, whose voice had become kind and even motherly. Lie down, dear, and rest. You need your strength now, oh, how much you need it. Where are my babies? Why aren't you showing them to me? The senior midwife commanded. Christina, show the girl to the mammal. Just a moment, Cornelia, I'm finishing up the sterilization. The girl brought the newborn baby who was so cute and funny as she wrinkled her face. Marta looked questioningly at the senior midwife. I have twins. Where is the second girl? You have a boy and a girl, but the boy was born very weak and his weight is below normal. We sent him to the neonatal intensive care unit for care. Marta cried, and the healthcare worker tried to calm her down. Why are you crying? It often happens that one of the twins dies. God willing, your baby will survive, and if not, it's all up to the Almighty. And it will be easier for you too. You don't have a husband, do you? Marta shamefully hid her eyes. No. The next morning, when the young midwife reported that the second baby had died, she didn't cry as hard anymore. After all, she had a daughter, and she gave all her love and care to this little bundle. Marta didn't even remember the faces of the women who became mothers together with her that night. She only remembered that one of them had an old-fashioned name, Constanza. Another memorable fact was that all the women in her hospital room gave birth to boys, and she was the only one who had a girl. Marta's aunt, Sophia, met her at the hospital with her newborn daughter. In her dreams, the young mother had imagined this important event differently, but Xavier didn't show up. He appeared when their daughter was 6 months old. He spent the whole day with them, admiring the little girl with undisguised admiration. It's amazing that she has the same red hair as me. Marta thought that in this moment he acknowledged paternity. Xavier left another envelope of money before leaving, and casually mentioned, "I'm going to have a child soon too. I married the daughter of my dad's business partner." Marta just shrugged, but didn't say anything. Her premature love had died in her heart and left nothing but regret behind. The next time Xavier appeared was on the eve of his daughter's 5th birthday. He gave her a teddy bear and said, "Here, Cornelia, this is your new friend. His name is Miguel." The girl tried to repeat the strange name of the toy animal, but it took her 3 times to get it right. Her mother and father laughed at Cornelia, and she became angry that she couldn't do it. This was Xavier's last visit, and he stopped providing money for his illegitimate daughter as well. Cornelia slept all night hugging her beloved toy. When it was already 7 a.m., Marta started waking her up. "Time to get up. Come on, open your eyes, sleepyhead." The girl stretched in bed and accidentally touched her scratched cheek. The pain reminded her of yesterday's fight, and she pleaded with her mother. "Mom, can I not go to school today?" "No, my dear, you're going to school. Come on, quickly go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, and have breakfast." Cornelia whined. "Mommy, what about my face? That idiot Catarina already bullies me, and if I show up with a green cheek, the whole school will laugh at me. You shouldn't have started a fight. You made the trouble yourself, so deal with it. You're a big girl now and you have to take responsibility for your actions." I've heard it before. It's annoying. A mother should protect her child, not scold them. Wow, how we talked. As if I don't protect you. Cornelia clung to her mother. "Mommy, please escort me to school. I'm afraid of Catarina's father." "Okay, I'll try to think of something. Now get ready and hurry up." Marta worked only during the day, and her shift started at 9 o'clock. But just in case, she called the senior nurse and warned her that she might be delayed. The nurse asked with concern, "Did your daughter get into trouble?" "Yes, she got into a fight with a classmate. Kids these days are so active, but there's nothing we can do about it. We are responsible for them. Take care of her, Marta. I'll ask Edita to cover for you." The teacher was waiting for them at the locker room. When she saw Marta, she triumphantly exclaimed, "Well done, Santes, for coming with your mom, otherwise you would have had to come back." The teacher decided to get down to business without delay. "It's an outrageous situation. The school principal has ordered me to take the toughest measures." Marta tried to calm the teacher down. "Federica, why deal with this in front of the kids? Maybe we could go somewhere else and talk calmly." "Okay, let's go to the teacher's lounge." She looked unkindly at the frightened girl. "You're coming with us too. Let your mom find out what kind of daughter she has." As soon as they entered the teacher's lounge, a presentable-looking man burst into the room while dragging a girl with a violet bruise under her eye. Ignoring those present, he placed his daughter in the center of the room. "Here, you see, admire the result of your work. I used to think that school was the safest place. But now I see that our educational institution is akin to a colony for juvenile delinquents. We can't let degenerates from troubled families into a normal school." After his introductory speech, the angry father started shaking his daughter. "Show us, Catarina, who disfigured you." The girl made a painful grimace and pointed in Cornelia's direction. "She did, Cornelia Santes." The man rushed towards the girl, but Marta shielded her daughter. "I won't allow you to hold a trial here over my child. And baseless insults towards others don't do you any credit either. Let's settle everything calmly." The teachers in the room were afraid to breathe. After all, Father Navarro held such a high position. Sergio was used to complete obedience and decisively approached Marta. Who are you? The woman calmly replied. Nobody gave you the right to speak to me like this. But I'll answer your question. I'm Cornelia Santes' mother, who was disfigured by your daughter. Cornelia, come here. The green ink scratches on the girl's face impressed the teachers no less than the bruise under Navarro's eye. Even the deputy mayor was momentarily at a loss, but then quickly went on the offensive. Listen, you can poke me with these scratches as much as you want, I don't give a damn about that. What's more important to me is my daughter's health. You know, my child's health is also of great value to me. Especially since it's unknown what kind of infection is under your daughter's nails. Marta didn't want to offend the respected man. She just wanted to remind everyone that many infections start with dirty hands. But Sergio didn't let her finish. He started waving his fists in front of the unfortunate mother's face. How dare you say that about my daughter? Who are you to object to me at all? Yes, I can kick you and your lousy daughter out of town in 24 hours. This ugly scene took place in the teacher's lounge, but none of the teaching staff stood up for Marta and Cornelia. Catarina Navarro was triumphant and openly made faces at Cornelia. The woman silently listened to the bully and then calmly said, Your position doesn't mean anything, let alone reflect your level of intelligence. Let's go, daughter. Cornelia was very scared, and she ran after her mother. Federica followed them. Marta, I hope you understand that after this wild incident, your daughter can't study in our school. No, Federica, I don't understand. You can't just take my child and throw her out like that. The homeroom teacher changed her tone from demanding to pleading. You're right, we can't do that, so I'm very earnestly asking you to take the documents. There are many schools in the city and you can arrange for your daughter. Put yourself in our shoes. Don't you understand that Catarina's father won't calm down? Why make enemies for yourself? Marta looked at the teacher and felt genuinely sorry for her. Okay, I'll come for the documents tomorrow. Federica was delighted. I suggest you go to the third school, where my classmate is the principal. Your daughter Cornelia is doing well in her studies, and they will gladly accept her there. The teacher saw them to the door and breathed a sigh of relief. Cornelia walked silently behind her mother for some time. She didn't understand everything that had been said during the meeting with Federica's father in the teacher's room. Mom, does this mean I won't be going to this school anymore? She finally asked. Yes, we'll have to find a new school at the beginning of the school year. This is what happens when you don't think before you act. Her mother scolded. Cornelia burst into tears. I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to. It's too late for tears now, calm down. I have to take you to Aunt Sophia's now, and I have to go to work, her mother said. The next day, Marta picked up her daughter's documents and took them to another school. Cornelia reluctantly started at the new school, but the troubles didn't end there. At the end of the week, the head nurse called Marta into her office. Marta, there's been an unpleasant situation. We're cutting back on the junior medical staff. Marta felt the blood drain from her face. Are you saying you're cutting my job? But you can't do this to me. I'm a single mother, I have to feed my child. The head nurse, who had always been kind to her, suddenly snapped. Big deal. You're not the only hero out there. Others are raising 2 or 3 kids alone. Anyway, my job is just to warn you. You have a month to find another job, which should be enough time. Marta walked away, not knowing where to go. She knew immediately who was responsible for her impending job loss. Cornelia saw her mother's pale face and rushed to her. Mom, did something really bad happen again? It's all my fault. I'm bad. Just send me to boarding school, I won't be upset. Silly, how will I live without you? You are my most important treasure. And I will definitely find work, Marta said. A month had passed unnoticed, and Marta had still not found a suitable job. After much hesitation, she turned to the Housing and Utilities office where her mother had once worked, and where she herself had begun her career. But the management at the enterprise had changed, and they promised her only part-time work. Moreover, the area was far from where they lived. But out of desperation, the woman agreed. Savings were dwindling, and for the past few weeks, she and her daughter had to go without the essentials. Aunt Sophia could have helped, but she unexpectedly went to her son. Spring flew by, and hot summer followed. The weather had unpleasant surprises. Sometimes there was tropical heat, and sometimes there were torrential rains for days on end. Moreover, meteorological conditions could change in minutes. That's what happened on that July day. The sun was shining from early morning, and then a stormy wind suddenly blew. Passers-by hurried to take shelter from the weather because the darkened sky did not portend anything good. Marta also hastily began to gather her inventory. By the time she finished her work, there was no one left outside. Only rare cars passed by. The gusty wind tore apart street structures. When the woman ran past, an advertising billboard collapsed on her. She lay on the wet road crushed by a heavy structure and couldn't move. She wanted to scream, but only a gurgling sound came out of her chest. The last thing the victim remembered was the faces of the medics. They were asking her something, but she couldn't answer. The man with the familiar face said, "Hang in there, dear, we'll take you to the hospital now, where our doctors will help you." Gathering her last bit of strength, she whispered, "I have a daughter, she's only 11. There's a phone in my pocket." Cornelia waited for her mother from work until late in the evening. The fridge was empty, and she was very hungry. The girl knew that her mother would definitely bring something, but she wasn't there. She looked out the window, where the weather was raging, and thought, "Mom is late because of the rain and wind. Soon everything will end, and she will come." Closer to midnight, the wind died down, but the raindrops continued to monotonously beat against the window pane. So, with the sound of the rain, Cornelia fell asleep in the arms of her faithful friend Miguel. She woke up to a strong stomachache and an unbearable hunger. The girl checked her food supplies again. Apart from a handful of pasta and salt, she found nothing. But even this modest discovery cheered her up. "It's okay, I'll cook some pasta now and leave some for Mom." At 11 years old, Cornelia could cook not only omelets and fried eggs but even pancakes. So she got to work. When breakfast was ready, someone rang the doorbell. She knew she shouldn't just open the door and asked, "Who's there?" A man's voice replied, "I need Cornelia Santes. I'm a doctor with the ambulance service. Your mother is in the hospital. Something terrible happened to her." The girl quickly opened the door and asked, "Is it true? Where is my mother?" The man confirmed with regret. "Yes, something very heavy fell on her. In a word, your mother is in very bad condition right now. But you can visit her. Do you know where the first hospital is? Is it on the other side of town? Is there also an amusement park there?" asked Cornelia. "Yes, it's quite far," replied the man. "It's okay, I'll make my way there." "Thank you, sir." From the kitchen came suspicious smells, and Cornelia rushed to save the pasta. But it was too late, the food had turned into a sticky inedible mass. Swallowing, the girl whispered, "It's okay, I can wait. I'll go to Mom, maybe she has some money left." Since walking was too far, Cornelia hopped on the bus and hid behind the passengers. No one noticed that she was riding without a ticket. Several times, Cornelia had walked with her mom in the park and quickly found the hospital. But she wasn't allowed to see her mom. A stern lady scrutinized her for a long time, then searched for something in the journal. Santes is in the ICU, you can't go in. When she gets better, then you can. For now, go home, little one. Let the adults call the hospital and ask about her condition. Despair completely overtook the girl, and the pain in her stomach became unbearable. She walked aimlessly down the street, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly, her head began to spin very strongly, and Cornelia decided to sit down in the park for a while. Gil was dreaming of something very pleasant, so he didn't want to open his eyes. But duty required him to be calm and collected. He jumped out from under the blanket and did a few warm-up exercises. Isabel opened her eyes and grumbled unhappily. "Gil, you're annoying me with your routine. You could have quietly crawled into the living room to jump and do push-ups to your heart's content." The woman rolled over to the other side and asked in the same drowsy voice. "Wake up Leonor at 7:20, or else I have a day off today and I have the right to lie in bed." Gil quietly asked. "Isabel, I understood everything about your day off, but I didn't get why we need to wake up our son." "What silly questions. He has to go to school." Maybe the meaning of her words reached the woman herself because she laughed out loud and said, "I'm getting too carried away with this work. I forgot that it's already midsummer." Gil didn't want to upset his wife, so he encouragingly remarked, "This kind of thing happens to many people. They're called temporal paradoxes and usually have a short-term nature. You were sleeping, dreaming, maybe traveling in other parallel worlds." Isabel playfully threw a small pillow at her husband and said, "You'll say something that will make me think about the weird thing all day. You woke me up, and I'll never forgive you for it." Her husband pulled her close and asked, "You really won't forgive me?" Before she could answer, their son Leonor stumbled in, half asleep and disoriented. He was scolded by his mother for not knocking before entering, but he just complained about their morning noise and mentioned a dream he had about a twin brother. Gil looked at his son, and then at his wife. "Well, that's it. The hospital ward is fully staffed. There seems to be some kind of sleep epidemic in our apartment. Mom has lost track of time, and our son is talking to imaginary brothers," Gil said. Leonor ran to her father. "Dad, didn't you ever have dreams like that?" "No, unlike some people, I don't have useless thoughts wandering around in my head. You, my son, should read something useful instead of dreaming and playing tank games on the computer all day," Gil replied. Isabel supported her husband. "Leonor, your father is right. You have a whole list of things to do this summer, and you're just wasting your time." The boy looked dissatisfied with his parents. "Here we go again. Why do you adults think you can dictate to a child what to do? Oh, you never cease to amaze us, son. The thing is, you're still too young to make decisions on your own. One thing I can advise you, don't hurry to grow up," Gil said. He looked at his watch. "I knew it. You took away my precious time with your pointless conversation. Please don't deprive me of breakfast, or I'll have to eat someone at work today." Gil picked up his son and spun him around like an airplane. Leonor squealed with delight, and Isabel enjoyed the morning scene. Her husband seemed to read her mind and asked jokingly, "Mom, do you want me to spin you like the airplane too?" The woman recoiled. "No, not that. I don't play those games. All right, guys, let's go. We really won't have time for breakfast if we don't hurry." The man asked in surprise, "Where are you going? Don't you have the day off today?" "Yes, but I need to quickly stop by at work, and then I'll go to the salon to get some beauty treatments done. Just don't overdo it." Gil winked at his son, who responded in the same manner. Leonor was used to his parents always rushing off to work. Even if they woke up very early, they still managed to be late. His mother was especially good at this as she always forgot something. Since Leonor was the most free member of the family, he decided to help his mother and placed the items that she often forgot on the console in the hallway, an umbrella and sunglasses. Isabel thanked her son for his care. "Leonor, thank you. I don't know what I would do without you. But the umbrella, you probably didn't need to give me." They promised heavy rain and gusts of wind up to 30 meters per second today. So the umbrella won't be superfluous. Gil said all of this in a tongue twister and rushed out the door. Isabel followed him a few seconds later, and Leonor shrugged. "Dad went to work, and where did Mom go? If I had the day off, I would lie on the couch all day and watch cartoons. I could also play the new game, but my parents don't allow me to use the computer during the day." The boy went to the kitchen to clear the table. According to an unwritten agreement, this duty was supposed to be done by the person who was free. Although Leonor did not like this rule, he had been the one doing it all summer. His mother took over the duties when she was off on the weekends. So he was disappointed that she had left for her own affairs. After cleaning up in the kitchen, Leonor wanted to go outside to ride his scooter in the yard. He was already planning to call Max, his best friend, but he looked out the window. "Looks like the walk is cancelled today. Something's about to happen." Max called him himself. "Do you see what's happening outside?" "I'm not blind, I see it. I thought we were going to have a scooter race, and then this happened. Unexpected, but pleasant. What are we reading?" The boy jumped on his feet. "Oh, Dad, you scared me. Why are you so early?" "It's almost 4:45, so I practically returned from work on time. And you still haven't answered my question. What are you reading?" Leonor closed the book and showed it to his father. "The Prince and the Pauper. A cool fairy tale, but it's like real life." "Why do you think so?" The boy thought for a moment, then his gaze wandered back to the window where the bad weather continued to rage. "I read on the internet that everyone has a twin. And there's a movie about it. You know, Dad, I often feel like I have one too. I even hear him calling me sometimes." Gil touched his son's forehead, then ruffled his chestnut red hair. "Well, it looks like you don't have a fever. Most stories about doubles are just the product of science fiction writers' imaginations. And you're quite the fantasist. But by the way, it's time for you to get a haircut. Your mane has grown like a lion's. I wonder where our mom went." Leonor laughed. "Maybe the wind blew her away." "Son, don't joke like that. We'll be lost without your mother." Soon Isabel appeared. She was in an agitated state and told her loved ones about the horror she had experienced. "You guys have no idea what a nightmare it is out there. And the worst part is that it all started suddenly. I barely made it into the mall, had to wait out the storm there. So my hair appointment for today is cancelled. And that means our day off was wasted. I'll make dinner now, just need to change clothes." The woman was impressed all evening, and after dinner she remembered the tragedy that had occurred almost before her eyes. Can you imagine, on the street a billboard fell on a woman, she was completely crushed. Then they took her away in an ambulance. "Thank God I managed to find shelter in time, or I could have been hurt too," Gil reasonably noted. During a natural disaster, it's necessary to find a shelter. It's dangerous to wander the streets. The victim was unlikely to be taking a leisurely walk. More likely, the bad weather caught her while she was working. She was wearing special protective clothing. Safety rules are the same for everyone. Careless attitudes towards them come at a high cost. I recently went to a burnt-down warehouse on assignment from the editorial team. It was all so simple. They left without turning off the fan, and the losses were in the millions. Leonor wasn't interested in adult topics, and he hurriedly got up from the table. Parents, can I turn on the computer? You can, but not for long. The boy ran past his parents with a joyful shout. The couple exchanged glances, and the woman thoughtfully said, "It's such a happiness to be parents." The husband hugged her tightly. "You're right, dear. Now I can't even imagine how we lived without this red-haired rascal before. I wonder who he inherited such fiery hair from." Isabel replied with a smile. "You don't suspect I was cheating on you, do you?" "No, what are you talking about? Leonor has all my habits. My grandfather was red-haired, probably his great-grandson took after him." "Yes, you can't deal with genetics." "Listen, Gil, maybe that's enough smart talk for today. First, twins, then parallel worlds. Now, we've moved on to genetics. Let's go to bed instead." The man agreed with his wife, especially since he was tired himself from the day's events. He wanted to give his head and other parts of his body some rest. "Sweetheart, but horses don't have horns." The girl threw a haughty look at her parents and declared in a know-it-all tone, "My horse has horns, and look at his tail, isn't it lush?" Isabel's imagination was boundless. She was constantly coming up with something, and in school, no competition was held without her. To ensure that their daughter's talent did not go to waste, her parents enrolled her in a music school, an art studio, and several other clubs. But the girl quickly lost interest in applied arts. However, she successfully completed the music school's piano class and entered a conservatory. At one of the final concerts, a young man approached her. "Let me to introduce myself, Bravo Gil, journalist." The old-fashioned etiquette amused Isabel. "Do you always introduce yourself like that? Or do you want to give more importance to your person?" "Both, actually. I like to make an unforgettable impression, especially on girls." The young man also laughed. But this pleasant pause did not last long, and a strict expression replaced the smile on his face. "Isabel, you have such an unusual name. And you play great. You must have studied for a long time." "Yes, 13 years. I couldn't do that. I prefer to bother people with tricky questions. And you also decided to find out all my secrets. Am I right?" "Almost. Actually, today I'm here not out of curiosity, but on a top-secret mission. I was tasked with writing about the winner of the regional piano competition. I went through all the floors of your school in search of the owner of this high title, and I was pointed to you. Okay, I'm ready to answer any of your questions. Just please don't make me laugh." Isabel told him about herself, and he wrote everything down in his notebook. Then the aspiring correspondent took her photo and promised to call when the article was ready. Isabel dictated her phone number to him, and they said goodbye. She had already forgotten about that fleeting encounter and the article promised by the frivolous journalist when he appeared at the conservatory again. "Here, brought this for you to check. It's a draft. You can underline any inaccuracies and cross out any nonsense from the text." The article was short, just a few paragraphs. But Isabel liked the style and the language. She looked at the young man with undisguised admiration. "Great job. Honestly, I really liked it. It's as if it's not about me, but about another girl. I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I can't play the piano like you, and I don't understand anything about music notation. But that doesn't stop me from admiring beauty. Do you mind if I walk you home?" replied the young man. Isabel immediately liked this lively guy. It was interesting and easy to talk to Gil. And they started spending all their free time together. Isabel's parents never interfered in her personal life and had no objections to their daughter dating a budding journalist. It was a different story in Gil's family. When his father and mother found out that their son was dating a simple musician, a real scandal erupted. Gil was the youngest child in the family, and his parents had been overprotective of him since childhood. However, despite their care, the boy grew up active and self-sufficient. But the main reason for frequent family conflicts was the boy's unwillingness to follow conventions. His father, Rodrigo, was a high-ranking official in the recent past. Before retiring, he moved with his family to the city of his childhood, where he dreamed of spending his old age in peace and harmony. But his son did not allow this dream to come true because he fell in love with a simple girl. The parent was angry with his son for a long time, but eventually, he accepted his choice. However, he warned him. "Since you are so independent, don't expect any help from us when you find yourself in trouble. Now your mess is yours." This warning hurt Gil deeply. "Dad, if you're talking about money, then I'll never ask you for a penny again." Rodrigo did not give up his position. "Oh, you're scaring me." "You're right, son, it's time to live on your own and not depend on your father and mother." This remark hurt the boy even more. Of course, he maintained ties with his family, but Isabel refused to go to his parents' house after the first visit. "Gil, I can't do this. Your parents didn't like me from the start, but they don't even try to hide it. So I don't want to attract their negative energy to myself. By the way, they will be calmer if I show up less often in their home." For a while, the fears subsided, but then they flared up with renewed force. The reason for the dissatisfaction of her husband's parents was the young couple's lack of children. Although the timing was not critical, they had been unable to conceive a child for only 3 years, and Isabel gloated. "You didn't listen to your father, that's the result. Maybe your Isabel is sick, otherwise why is she unable to have a child? You should have asked your wife about her past in your spare time, my son. You're a journalist and you can dig up any information." Gil boiled with anger then. He really wanted to snap at his father, but he knew it would only further infuriate the old man. So he asked his father not to measure everyone by his own yardstick and not to touch his wife. The confrontation between the two sides would probably have lasted for years, but Isabel finally became pregnant, and this event brought the two families together. Everyone eagerly awaited the firstborn in the family. Leonor still cannot share her grandparents today, and he tries to use their love for his own benefit. Isabel was amazed at her son's ingenuity many times. Although Gil also had such abilities, Leonor's quality was expressed in a more vivid form than his father's. The happy memories of a mother and wife were interrupted by thoughts of her son. She fell asleep soundly and did not disturb her husband anymore. Gil woke up in a good mood and immediately began exercising. When the warm-up was in full swing, a sleepy Leonor crawled out of the children's room. "Dad, do you really like waving your arms and doing squats for nothing? You have no idea, son, what a pleasure it is. Try it, you'll like it. Your body immediately fills with energy, and your brain starts working actively." With nothing to do, Leonor started to repeat the movements with his father, and after a couple of minutes, he said excitedly, "Dad, it really works. Even better than in PE. Morning exercises and physical education are different disciplines. The first is specially designed to bring the body into working condition, and the second exists for the development of certain skills. I just can't understand why, my son, you decided to join me today." Leonor didn't flirt like a girl and got down to business. "Dad, how is your schedule today?" "As usual, packed." "Why do you ask me such an unusual question?" "New roller coasters are opening in the park today, and I want to try them out." "Okay, I'll come up with something." A voice came from the kitchen. "Sweethearts, let's quickly go to the table. What are you gossiping about over there?" The father's promise had a positive effect on the boy's mood, and he burst into the kitchen with energy and enthusiasm. "Mom, Dad promised me we'll go to the amusement park today. There are new roller coasters, I'd like to have a ride." As the head of the family appeared in the kitchen, Isabel, would you like to come with us? Isabel's eyes lit up mischievously but immediately dimmed. I would love to join you, but I have lessons to prepare for the competition this afternoon. I won't be able to make it. That's a shame. We could have tested the extreme rides as a family. An extra dose of adrenaline wouldn't hurt. Oh, no. Not that. I've been scared of those things since childhood. You have to be careful on them or you can get hurt or even killed. Please be careful. Leonor decided to have the last word. Mom, do you doubt the abilities of your husband and son? That's insulting. The woman kissed her son on the head. You're still a little boy. You have to grow up and gain some wisdom before you become a man. She looked at her watch and gasped. You distracted me again. I'll get fired for being late all the time. When the parents ran off to their jobs, Leonor settled comfortably on the couch. He decided to finish the book he started reading yesterday about the adventures of a prince and a pauper. He also wanted something like that to happen in his life. Like any child, Leonor had a special fondness for entertainment. And the prospect of becoming a prince was tempting, which no modern boy would refuse. His father caught him reading again. Leonor, are you the real Leonor or someone else in disguise? Did yesterday's storm have a positive effect on you? If I'm not mistaken, you were eager to go to the park this morning, but now you're reading a book. The boy looked at his father, but his gaze remained dreamy. Dad, I decided not to waste my time while you're at work. I finished the book. And what conclusions did you draw? The prince is a complete fool. And the poor boy is awesome. I wouldn't mind being a prince for a while. But if I had a twin brother, we would do some amazing things together. Like what? Well, we could trick everyone at school. That would be cool. Leonor, are we going to the park? If so, then change your clothes. The boy rushed to his room and was back in a minute, pulling on a shirt as he went. I'm ready. After lunch, the heat had subsided a bit, and the park was packed with mothers and children. This recreational area was created a couple of years ago to attract a young audience. Although some parts of the park still showed signs of yesterday's storm, the park workers had already cleaned up the area. Gil asked his son. Where are we going? Come on, Dad, let's ride the roller coaster. It's so cool. Are you really ready for such a challenge? Do you doubt me? After the thrilling ride, they descended from the slide and enjoyed the tornado attraction. Leonor was filled with excitement and a bit tired. His father asked, what else do you need for complete happiness? It's hot. Can we get some ice cream? The man took out some change. Look, there's a stand over there, you can buy some for both of us. The boy strolled slowly in the specified direction. He bought 2 portions of cold treats and was on his way back when he noticed a crying girl. At first, Leonor thought it was a boy and even mentally condemned him for crying. But upon closer inspection, he realized it was a girl. Why are you crying? The girl looked at him with an unfriendly gaze from under the faded baseball cap in the sun. What's it to you? It doesn't really matter to me. I just asked. I thought maybe someone hurt you. I actually thought you were a boy at first, not a girl. People often mistake me for a boy, and my mom says I look like a little tomboy. The girl burst into tears again. Leonor felt sorry for her, and there was a moment when he almost cried too. He touched the girl's shoulder. Stop crying, what's wrong? Tell me how I can help you. The girl remained silent but eagerly looked at the ice cream in his hand. Leonor caught the look and willingly handed over his ice cream. Here, take it. Are you hungry? The girl was already devouring the ice cream and just nodded in agreement. Leonor decided to take action. You sit here and don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. Running a few meters away, the boy asked. They're selling pies there. What do you like more? It doesn't matter. When the son, out of breath from running, returned with one ice cream, Gil was surprised. Did you finish yours on the go? No, Dad, I gave my ice cream to a girl. She's sitting over there and crying, she's very hungry. The man stood up from the bench. Oh. Then lead me to your new friend. Leonor alternately caught up with and lagged behind his father. Dad, do you have any change left? Let's buy her something to eat. There's a lady selling pastries near where they sell ice cream. Gil headed towards the spot pointed out by his son. Although he was puzzled by his son's unusual behavior, the boy's willingness to help another person delighted him. And he thought, a real man is growing up, willing to sacrifice his own share for that girl. The man noticed the girl sitting alone on the bench from afar. Leonor waved at her invitingly. Hey, here are some pastries for you. He handed the girl a bag of food, and she thanked him. Thank you. At that moment, Gil looked at the young stranger's face and felt sick. This can't be. Leonor noticed his father's face turn pale and asked, Dad, what's wrong? The girl also looked at the man in surprise, and her hand, with the partially eaten pastry, hung in the air. She rushed to Gil. Are you feeling okay? Sit here. My mom worked at a hospital, and I know that this happens to people when their hearts hurt. Leonor looked at the girl with admiration. Wow, you're amazing. And here I know nothing about medicine. Gil watched the children and couldn't believe his eyes. Kids, stand next to each other, please. The children complied with his request and looked at each other in amazement. Leonor asked with clear displeasure. Dad, what kind of game is this? At first, I thought it was a game of my sick imagination. Leonor, have you looked in the mirror lately? Why should I? I'm not a girl. Apparently, your new friend doesn't care much about her appearance either. Girl, please take off your cap. Cornelia obediently fulfilled the man's requests. Gil continued. And now look at each other. Guys, my brain doesn't understand this, but you really look alike. So, Leonor, it's not by chance that you keep thinking about your twin. This revelation was so shocking that Gil called his wife. Isabel, drop everything and come to the park. Something incredible has happened. We're here with Leonor. Come and see for yourself. When Gil called his wife on emotions, he didn't think about the consequences his call could have. Isabel ran along the park path, but when she saw her husband and children, she stumbled and nearly fell. This can't be, she exclaimed. Her husband caught her. Darling, I almost fainted too, couldn't believe my eyes. I'm a realist, and I don't believe in coincidences. We need to find out everything. Maybe you can shed some light on the situation. Isabel shook her head. Gil, I'm in shock myself. Don't torture me with questions. The children were no less surprised than the adults. Leonor asked Cornelia. Do you understand anything? No, do you? No, but we look alike, and that's a fact. You know, I always felt like I had a twin brother. Did you ever feel like that? No, Cornelia replied, still holding the bag with warm pies tightly to her chest. She wasn't used to being the center of attention and was flustered. When all the participants in this strange meeting calmed down a little, Cornelia told them about the misfortune that happened to her mother yesterday. Gil was determined. Isabel, I think we need to get to the bottom of this. And the mother of this girl can help us clarify the situation. The man looked questioningly at the young stranger, and she blurted out. My name is Cornelia, and my mother's name is Marta. She used to work at a hospital, but a different one. But after I got into a fight with Catarina, they fired her, and we became very poor. Isabel looked at the girl with pity. Poor thing, you've suffered a lot. Are you hungry? Let's feed you now. Cornelia pointed to the bag. Thank you, I've already eaten a little. Let's go to my mom's instead. Seeing a whole delegation in the waiting room, the woman that was familiar to Cornelia shouted. Where do you all think you're going? This is a hospital, not a cinema. We have a special regime here. Gil showed his ID and said. We really need to be here. The thing is, I'm investigating a complicated case. The woman widened her eyes and said. If that's the case, I'll let you in, but only one visitor is allowed in the intensive care unit, and only relatives. Who are you related to Santes? Without hesitation, Gil blurted out. I'm her brother. They were both allowed to enter the room. Marta was overjoyed when she saw her daughter. Sweetie, how did you find me? Her daughter replied. The man from the ambulance told me everything. Tears filled Marta's eyes as she said. Forgive me, my dear, for leaving you. I didn't think it would turn out this way. You must be starving, we have no food left at home. Cornelia looked at Gil and said. Mom, I already ate. This is Gil, and he has a son named Leonor. We look like twins. Can you imagine? Even though the woman's face was already pale, it became even more so as she met the gaze of the man who had been silent all this time. Gil experienced shock for the second time in one day. Despite the woman's sickly pallor, he realized that they looked alike too. Marta smiled and said. Your face looks very familiar to me. Have we met before? Anything is possible, Gil replied. They stared at each other for a long time, and all of Gil's thoughts were jumbled up in his head. He wanted to ask this woman a lot of questions, but he only asked. I'm sorry for my impertinence, but could you tell me when your daughter was born? Marta named the date and whispered, so her daughter wouldn't hear. I had twins, but the boy only lived for 2 hours and died. Which hospital did you give birth in? The first one. Gil felt like he was suffocating. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together. But the suspicion that could turn out to be true frightened him. He thought, no, not this. Isabel won't be able to handle it. On parting, he promised Marta that he and his wife would take care of Cornelia. The woman held him back. Gil, where could I have seen you before? Don't worry about it. Get better soon, and we'll come to see you again for sure. Cornelia happily accepted Leonor's offer to stay with them until her mother recovered. But Leonor was the happiest of them all. Wow, this is cool. So, you're like my sister. The girl shrugged. I don't know. Maybe we just look alike, like twins. Have you read about that phenomenon? Yeah, I even have a serious book on the subject. If you want, I'll let you read it. And I can also teach you how to play tank games. Do you like computer games? I don't have a computer, only a button phone. My mom gave it to me for my birthday. All evening, Gil and his wife watched the kids. Isabel cautiously remarked. Gil, don't you think all of this is strange? It's just not possible. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. Look at the kids, they found common ground so quickly. They really do look very similar. Gil, I'm scared of what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm scared too. The next day, Gil secretly went to the laboratory to do a genetic test. He brought a few strands of hair from both Leonor and Cornelia. From that moment on, his investigation began, but he didn't realize where it would lead him. A small auditorium where 5-minute conferences usually took place was filled with people to capacity. And the reason for such a massive event was serious: the honoring of the institution's best employees. This tradition had long been established in the hospital, and all leaders strove to maintain it. And some were not shy about adding creative elements to the program. There were interesting innovations this time as well. At the initiative of the chief physician, it was decided to hold a small banquet after the ceremonial part. Cornelia was on the list of honorees. She had worked in the maternity ward for 35 years and was very proud to have helped bring not hundreds, but several thousand babies into the world. She never kept count herself, but the organizers of the celebration filled in this gap and today must announce the data of her personal statistics. Pompous fanfares interrupted the thoughts of the deserving worker. The chief physician himself gave an introductory speech and, in conclusion, said, "Our team is united not only by professional duty but also by good traditions. And we hope that the younger generation of medical workers will continue this relay race. After all, our respected Cornelia has almost 6,000 little lives to her credit. And this is a real feat of a person devoted to their profession." Applause resounded in the hall, and the elderly midwife could no longer hold back her tears. The words of the chief physician and the attention of her colleagues touched her heart. She stood up, and the entire hall also stood up and began to chant, "Thank you, Cornelia." This was the peak of Olympus that Cornelia never sought. She always tried to strictly follow her professional duties and never thought about rewards. When the chief physician named another distinguished specialist, Cornelia sighed with relief and took her seat. She whispered to her colleague Christina, "I don't like it when everyone looks at me. I get lost immediately, and I want to hide under the baseboard." The young colleague smiled. "Don't be so modest. Today is your day, and you deserve this attention. I also owe you a lot. If it weren't for you, who knows where I would be now?" The mood of the elderly midwife immediately soured. "Christina, you never change. You couldn't find a more opportune moment to remind me of something I've been trying to forget all these years. You misunderstood me, Cornelia. I meant your valuable experience, which you have passed on to me all these years." Christina slyly winked. "I'll remember that for the rest of my life. And today, I'll even have a drink to celebrate." The woman looked sternly at Christina again but said nothing. When she returned home late in the evening with a bunch of flowers and valuable gifts, her soul no longer rejoiced like during the noisy celebration. At home, the loneliness that had become so familiar awaited her. It looked at her with angry eyes from every corner, and Cornelia couldn't get rid of it. Although she had tried to do so many times before. But in the past, at least work had helped her forget, and with retirement, her life had turned into a nightmare of memories. After graduating from medical school, Cornelia was sent to a hospital in a provincial town not far from the regional center. She didn't like her first job right away. The hospital building itself needed major repairs, and the atmosphere in the wards was depressing. The staff was constantly in a gloomy mood. When Cornelia asked her senior colleague, whom they had assigned to her, about the reason for such an attitude towards work, the woman answered angrily, "Why bother? For the salary that can't even last half a month. Normal people have long since moved to private clinics. But in our village, there's nowhere else to go but this hospital." The head of the department was also indifferent to the new staff. He advised her directly, "I don't think you'll last long here. I suggest you start looking for a better place in advance. Complete the 2 years required and you can find a more successful job." The unfriendly reception from the team cooled Cornelia's enthusiasm a little. But she didn't plan on giving up. The young midwife realized how difficult it would be after her first 2 shifts. As a beginner, she was assigned to the day shift and the chief doctor said, 2 or 3 shifts will be enough to adapt, and then you'll work independently. Cornelia, we have a severe shortage of personnel, so you'll have to manage alone. When Camelia went on her first night shift, her knees were shaking a little. But the on-duty doctor, Roberto, reassured her. "Yes, don't worry so much. Usually, we have a calm night. Everyone tries to give birth during the day. In the worst-case scenario, we're allowed to call for backup." Camelia calmed down a little, but not for long. Closer to midnight, women in labor began to arrive one after another. They even had to use the operating room because there wasn't enough space in the delivery room. The girl rushed into the attending surgeon's office and said, "Roberto, what should I do? I'm alone, and there are 6 of them, and they're all screaming." The doctor looked at her disdainfully. "Everyone screams during childbirth, didn't you know that? If you're scared, why did you choose to become a midwife?" He stood up and opened the door to his office. "Go and do your job. I'll come by a little later." He laughed, and the smell of alcohol hit the girl. She rushed out of the room and almost ran into a nurse with a bucket. Without thinking about the consequences, the girl asked, "Is the doctor always in this condition at work?" The nurse didn't even seem surprised. "What's the big deal? People work under constant stress. And if they relax a little, nothing bad will happen." But it was during Camelia's first shift that an emergency occurred. 3 women were giving birth simultaneously, and one of them was supposed to have twins. The young midwife ran from table to table and couldn't control the process alone. The situation was further complicated by one of the women demanding special attention. She was screaming, "Girl, why are you running around like a headless chicken? Do you know who my husband is? If something happens to my child, I will have you arrested." There was no time to deal with the complaints of the high-status patient, and VIPs were treated differently back then anyway. So Camelia ignored the woman's outburst. Just then, another woman who was giving birth to twins started to scream. "I'm in labor," she cried. The midwife rushed over, but in her haste, her hands were shaking, and one of the babies slipped out and fell to the floor. The mother screamed in horror. "What's wrong with my baby? Why isn't he crying?" The midwife picked up the fallen baby, and he squeaked softly a few times. At that moment, the second baby of the twins was born, and he let out a loud cry. The demanding mother calmed down. "Is that my baby crying?" "Yes, it is," Camelia reassured her. "Show him to me." Camelia showed the annoying patient someone else's baby. She knew that mothers were in shock after giving birth, and all newborns looked alike. She hoped that resuscitation procedures would save the accidentally fallen baby, but the newborn's condition was getting worse by the minute. She rushed to the head doctor's office. "Roberto, we have an emergency." She told the doctor what had happened, but he didn't even blink an eye. "Do I have to teach you how to handle such situations? Tell the mother something like this, and everything will be fine." "Wait, did you say it was twins?" "Yes." "Camelia, you are incredibly lucky. We will make all the mothers happy. No one will leave our hospital without a baby." She understood that the doctor was just trying to calm her down. The next morning, Roberto was in a bad mood, but he remembered the events of the previous day. "Camelia, give me the charts, we'll take care of everything." "How is that baby?" "He died, he didn't make it through the night," Camelia cried. The doctor yelled at the midwife. "You should have cried earlier, now shut up. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life dealing with this. You tell the woman who gave birth to twins that one of her babies died." "Got it." Camelia couldn't speak through her tears, she just nodded her head. "If you understand, then go and do it," the doctor said. Camelia had worked for 2 years at that provincial hospital before transferring to the city. She had wanted to forget about the incident, but it repeated itself 25 years later. Only this time, it wasn't her who was responsible for the death of a child, but her ward, Christina. The girl had dropped the baby right in front of her eyes. Cornelia remembered her own sad experience and felt sorry for the girl. And now this double substitution weighed heavily on her conscience. The result was ready on the same day that Marta was discharged. Gil went in the morning to pick up the results. He wanted to open the envelope right away, but for some reason he was scared and decided he would do it later. Maybe with everyone else. Isabel had also taken the day off work. They decided to meet Marta and all come home together. And then they would think about what to do next. Leonor and Cornelia had become such good friends that Gil couldn't imagine how to separate them now. They had agreed with his wife that until the DNA test was ready, they wouldn't think about anything else. Although each of them couldn't think about anything else. Isabel repeatedly remembered how the delivery went, how she walked around pregnant and realized that nothing like that could have happened. And then, it turns out, only one conclusion: her husband had cheated on her and his mistress gave birth at the same time as her. But that couldn't be true either. Firstly, because she was sure of her husband, and secondly, Gil wasn't that kind of person. He would never leave the fate of his child to chance. He couldn't have done that. Gil himself also considered all sorts of options, but nothing made sense. He didn't cheat on his wife, so Isabel must be hiding something from him. But that couldn't be true either, because he was sure of his wife. And there was only one thing left: it was just a twist of nature. They had to believe in twins. He was a little late. Isabel was already settling Marta in the taxi. She tried to keep herself together, because only now, in that moment, when Marta stood before her in the sunlight, did she realize who she reminded her of. Marta and her husband looked alike. Moreover, they looked so much alike that it was frightening. As they traveled home, Isabel wondered, what if the secret lies not in the children, but in Gil himself and this woman? Then the similarity of their children would be explained perfectly. Isabel tried to remember something from childhood stories about Gil's parents. But there was nothing like that. She was completely confused and decided that she wouldn't be able to figure it out on her own. Leonor and Cornelia sat with them for literally 5 minutes. Marta looked on them in silent horror at how alike they were. The children ate quickly, and Leonor asked, "Dad, can we go to the courtyard?" Gil sighed. "Sure, go ahead." Perhaps it was a good thing that the children wouldn't be around when they started talking. As soon as the door closed, Gil put an envelope on the table. "Marta, you understand that our children look too much alike to be a coincidence. But now there's another complication. As you can see, we look alike too. I don't know what to think. Honestly, I'm completely lost. I took the liberty of doing a DNA test. And not just one. There are several here. I haven't opened the envelope." Isabel nervously fidgeted with the tablecloth, and Marta became pale. "Yes, Gil, I understand everything. You did the right thing." He opened the envelope. "Okay, let's start with the children. Leonor and Cornelia, they're siblings." The paper slipped from his hand, and Gil looked bewilderedly at Isabel. She stared at him without blinking, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You did a paternity test on Leonor with me?" "Yes." Gil rummaged through the papers and pulled out the necessary sheet. Isabel stood up. "Open it, don't keep me waiting." Gil unfolded the paper, read what was written there, and looked at his wife. How could he tell her? "What is there?" Isabel snatched the paper from him, scanned it quickly, and froze. "No. This can't be." Marta took the paper, read it, and grabbed her head. "Oh God, what is this?" Gil grimly unfolded another sheet. "Leonor is Marta's son." He didn't wait for a reaction and unfolded the next one. "Leonor is my relative, but not my son." He looked at Isabel and Marta. It seems to me that this is all a big mistake. I don't understand anything. Now even Isabel had stopped understanding anything, but Marta seemed to be getting it. Wait, if we reason logically, my second child hasn't died, but ended up with you. How? Marta and Gil stared at Isabel, who wiped away her tears. I would like to understand that too. And even more, I would like to understand where my child is. Then she looked at Marta. I won't give you Leonor, he's our son. Gil raised his hand. Wait, I have one more paper. The women turned to him. What is it? The one about Marta's and me. Isabel stood up sharply. I don't understand. My brain refuses to believe in all this nonsense. Gil unfolded the last piece of paper. He read what was written there for a long time and then looked at the women. I don't know how this could be possible, but Marta and I seem to be brother and sister. Marta grabbed her head. Oh my God. They sat in silence for a long time, each lost in thought. Then Gil said, we need to figure this out. I happen to have vacation starting next week. I'm sorry, Isabel, but we won't go anywhere this time. Yeah, I don't want to go anywhere. Will you handle everything yourself? Yes. Isabel turned to Marta, wanting to say something. Isabel, there's no need. Marta covered Isabel's hand with her own. Let's not change anything for now. We'll wait, maybe Gil can find out something. To be honest, I can't wrap my head around all of this. It just can't be possible. Gil stood up. Marta, you understand that, regardless of what happened before, it won't change now. You're my sister. I think so. You can't be a niece, our children are blood relatives. However strange it may sound, we are one family, even though we don't know each other at all. I really hope we can be together. Marta almost started to cry. You know, I'm so used to always being alone or with my mom. By the way, about our mom. You need to remember everything that could lead to finding your father, any detail. And I'll visit our parents. But what about our children? Marta lifted her head. I remember little from the childbirth. But I remembered the name of the woman who gave birth, Isabel, or rather just the name. But even if the children were swapped, where is the other child? Gil sighed. Something tells me that it couldn't have happened without the intervention of third parties. But I'm sure I'll find something. Marta and Cornelia became frequent guests in Isabel and Gil's house. He was always absent, he didn't tell them anything. Isabel only knew that after his conversation with his parents, his father, who always didn't care about his son, actively joined the investigation. He had great opportunities and his help was very helpful. The women became friends, they talked a lot. Marta saw that Isabel was very afraid that Marta would assert her rights to her son. And Marta didn't know what to do. Leonor was her son, she hugged him with such tenderness, but she could see how much he loved his mother and father. She couldn't hurt the child so much. Finally, after almost a month, Gil called her. Marta, come to us. Better tomorrow while the kids are at school. Gil, did you find out something? Yes, but I'll be honest with you, I'd better not have done it. Marta was driving and thinking that most likely everything she was about to find out would completely turn her life upside down. But it was like a sore tooth. She understood that it was necessary. They're W.R. Gil's parents. The mother was teary, the father was silently looking out the window. When Marta arrived, the father sat down. Well, Gil, start. Marta listened carefully. If someone had ever told her that this was possible, she would never have believed it. So, it turns out that this woman essentially ruined your child. And the one who helped to hide it ruined yours. Marta finally voiced what Gil had so carefully avoided and didn't even say out loud. But the word was spoken. So it turns out that's exactly what happened. They looked at each other in confusion. Marta, there's one more thing. We found your father. He'll be here any minute now, accompanied by his son. To be honest, I didn't think he'd want to see you. But he immediately said he wanted to apologize. So, a long time ago, your mother worked as a cleaner in a sanatorium. All kinds of fancy people went there, including your father. He had an affair with a young, beautiful girl, who naively believed in his feelings. Later, when he left and some time had passed, she realized she was pregnant. Your mother snuck into the manager's office to find his address. She found it, your father's address, but she was caught in the act and fired. Pregnant and unemployed, she went to him. But he immediately chased her away, saying he was already married and had a son. He did come to see your mother once, when he was about to get an important job and wanted to make sure she wouldn't get in his way. But your mother chased him away. Marta listened carefully, then looked at Gil. Wait, so he's your father too? Gil nodded. Yes, he just doesn't know that your mother had twins. He doesn't need to know, and I love my parents. Gil's mother, who was never generous with affection, gently took her son's hand and pressed it to her cheek. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Marta tensed up. 2 months ago, she was a single mother trying to survive. And now, it turns out she has almost half a city of relatives. She had no idea what to do about it yet. Gil went to open the door and returned, literally, within a minute. An elderly man in an expensive coat walked in, followed by a younger man, apparently his son. Marta opened her mouth. This is fate playing tricks on us. Sergio walked in behind the man who was apparently her father. The same man who caused her to lose her job and her daughter to change schools. He looked at her, bewildered, even stopping in the doorway. Gil asked in surprise. Do you know each other? Marta nodded. Yes, because of this man, Cornelia had to change schools, and I had to work as a janitor. Sergio glared at his father in anger. Yes, Dad, you sure know how to surprise. His father stopped in front of Marta. You look very much like your mother, beautiful, and with intelligent eyes. I understand that it's pointless to ask for forgiveness. And, I don't even know if I would have tried to find you myself. But, since things turned out this way, I want you to know, you can count on me. With age, you realize that not all sins can be forgiven. I don't consider our relationship with your mother a sin. But, what I did for all those years, pretending that you didn't exist. Marta was grateful to him for not pretending to be happy and pouring out a bunch of unnecessary emotions in front of her. She felt absolutely nothing towards this person, even a little uncomfortable that Sergio was her stepbrother. Well, at least, stepbrother. She wouldn't have been able to handle it if he was her biological brother. Camelia was sure that the two stories would never come to light. Although, if the second one did, it would be understandable because it happened not too long ago. But, the first one. When the doorbell rang at 7 in the morning, she was sure it was her neighbor. She's always out and about at all hours. But it wasn't her. On the doorstep stood an unfamiliar man, 2 women, and 2 police officers. She looked carefully at the guests, and when she realized that one of the women and the man looked very similar, she held on to her heart and retreated further into the apartment. This can't be. One of the police officers said. It's good that there's no need to explain anything. Don't worry so much. You need to come to the station, where your colleague Christina is waiting for you, and give a statement. Gil already knew everything, but he still asked. If the child died, why did you do it this way? Camelia looked at him. Isn't it obvious? The mother of the deceased child would have gone crazy with grief, and the mother of the twins would never have been able to raise 2 children alone, because she had no husband, no relatives, in short, no support. The second time I did the same thing for the same reason. The old midwife proudly raised her head and left the apartment. Mom, today Leonor and I were chosen to host the New Year's celebration. Marta smiled. It had already been a year since everything became known. After a long conversation and agonizing contemplation, they decided to leave everything as it was. Marta and Gil were siblings, and so were Leonor and Cornelia. They were very close and spent a lot of time together. Isabel had cried then and almost knelt in front of Marta. I know what this decision cost you. But I promise you, we'll live as one big family. Thank you for not depriving me of my son. Cornelia was transferred to the same school as Leonor, and he jealously protected her. The children knew they were related, but at that age, they were not interested in the details of life. Marta now had a good job, and Isabel insisted that the woman go to university on distance learning. From time to time, her father or stepbrother would appear, inquire if they needed anything, leave money, and disappear again. Impossible. What exactly will your mission be? Cornelia rambled on so much that Marta couldn't always keep up with her speech. Well, no, that won't do. If you're going to ramble on at the party, you won't be the host. Cornelia stumbled and began to speak slowly and correctly. Marta smiled so that her daughter wouldn't see. Mom, you don't even know the most important news. There's a new girl in our class. Do you know who it is? No, how could I know? It's Catarina Navarro. Her dad brought her to us and told her to apologize to me. You can't imagine how much she didn't want to. And anyway, she's kind of different, she's become quiet. I don't know what's wrong with her, but I like her much more like this. Marta's father said something about them moving. Apparently, that's why they changed schools. Cornelia was still talking about something, but Marta was already lost in her thoughts. She often thought that fate had a mind of its own. To weave something like this into their family, you had to try very hard. She was interrupted from her thoughts by the doorbell. Marta was surprised. Neither Isabel nor Gil were planning to come to her. She went to open the door, swung it open, and froze. Xavier was standing on the threshold. Xavier, what are you doing here? The man looked tired, even sick. Can I come in? There was something so mournful about him that Marta stepped back. Well, come in. Do you want some tea? He nodded and went to the kitchen, stopping at the door, looking at Cornelia. Hi. Hello. Cornelia looked at her mother questioningly. Sweetie, go to your room. This is my acquaintance, he won't be here long. Cornelia grabbed her tea and happily went to the laptop that some old uncle had given her last year, also her mother's acquaintance. She was so happy then that she didn't even ask who this acquaintance was. Xavier sat across from Marta, twirling a mug in his hands. So, why did you come? Marta asked. He looked at her and smiled. And you've changed. The life lessons were good, Marta said. Marta knew something had happened to Xavier, but she couldn't bring herself to be more polite. He looked like he did when his father died. Finally, she gathered herself. Xavier, what happened to you? She asked. My wife and daughter died, Xavier sighed. How? Marta gasped. It's my fault. I filed for divorce. We never really had much love, but lately my wife was acting so. She always threatened to take our daughter. I loved my little girl so much. As soon as she found out that I had decided to go through with the divorce, she just took our daughter and left. I still don't know where they went. But something happened on the way. They didn't get very far from home. When did this happen? Marta asked. Almost 2 years ago. I don't remember how I lived all this time. Maybe you'll kick me out, and I'll understand. I won't even resist, you have every right to do that. And then Xavier began to cry. Marta was horrified to see his tears, her heart was breaking. Yes, he had hurt her very badly once, but now he was in even more pain. Marta stood up resolutely. Cornelia, come here. The girl came to the kitchen, looking bewildered at the man who was hastily wiping away tears. Cornelia, meet your father, Marta said. The girl paled slightly, and Xavier looked at her without looking away. Hello, he said. Cornelia suddenly moved away and disappeared into the room. Marta and Xavier exchanged glances. Maybe it wasn't right to do it so suddenly. But the girl quickly returned, carrying an old teddy bear in her hands. She showed Xavier the bear. What's his name? She asked. Xavier smiled. Miguel. The girl remained silently shaken, while Xavier hurriedly spoke up. I understand how you feel. This is how it turned out. If you don't mind, I'd like to invite you and your mom somewhere. We can take a walk, talk, eat, get to know each other, ultimately. Cornelia looked at her mother questioningly, and Marta shrugged, willing to do anything for her child. They went for a walk several times, and then winter holidays arrived, and Xavier suggested. Let's all go to a resort together. Can you imagine, here it's snowing, and there's a warm breeze, the sea, and all that? Cornelia clapped her hands. Mama, Mommy, say yes. Marta decided to consult with Isabel. She listened attentively, and then asked. Are you sure it's all just for Cornelia? Marta looked at her perplexedly. What do you mean? I think he wants to win not only the daughter but also you. Marta blushed immediately. If only Isabel knew how right she was. The woman often caught Xavier's gaze. He was just like he used to be a long time ago. And in those moments, Marta felt like she used to. Okay, Marta. Isabel smiled at her. Well, now we both know that sometimes we have to forgive what seems unforgivable. Marta looked at her timidly. Do you think I should try again? You won't know until you try, right? At the seaside, Xavier proposed to Marta. I don't know what your answer will be. But if you say no, know that I'll make the proposal again and again until we grow old. I've made a lot of mistakes in this life, but what I want now is right. It should be this way. Marta, I really do love you. I'll always remember how I treated you, but you shouldn't think that I'm doing this out of guilt. I truly want to spend the rest of my life with you. With you and our daughter. And Marta, waving away everything, fell into his arms. After all, everyone wants to be completely happy.